Welcome to a couple of bunkies. We had a neighbor that wanted us to make a 4-foot jewelry box with a lot of drawers.
These type of jewelry boxes are typically known as jewelry armoires.
We had a lot of cherry on hand, so I asked her if it would be okay if we went ahead and made the whole thing out of cherry.
Our neighbor agreed and Tim got to work. Tim went ahead and selected some straight boards and started the project.
With the help of chocolate, I went ahead and cut the boards to a certain size and set them off to the side so I can put them through the planer.
My father went down to the shop and helped Tim plane some boards.
And I ended up finishing up the boards fairly quickly.
After planing the boards, Tim went ahead and measured each board to a rough size and marked it.
I went ahead and set my table saw fence and made some cuts around 20 inches.
Tim stacked all the boards that needed to be joined in order to make the drawer bottoms.
Some of the boards were a little narrower than others, so I had to end up cutting some thinner boards to make up the difference.
Tim went ahead and ran each board through a table saw to put a straight edge on it. Then he went ahead and took the boards to the bandsaw to get resawed.
I resawed the cherry boards roughly in half before taking it over to the planer. I planed down the rough side that came from the bandsaw. I attempted to use my joiner, but every time I tried to do my boards, it just wasn't coming out straight. Maybe somebody can write in the comments on what I might be doing wrong.
Since joiner wasn't doing so well, Tim attempted to do the same job on the table saw and found out that table saw was better at it. So he joined all the boards over on the table saw. These resawed boards were exclusively for the drawers. Tim now went ahead and focused his attention on the main frame of the armoire.
I wanted to go ahead and make it look a little like a shaker style cabinet, but I went ahead and used miter butt joints for the corners. I also cut some 18-inch pieces and 12-inch pieces for the side and bottom and top of the frame.
Tim took out the miter saw to make 45-degree cuts on each of the frame boards. Then he taped same-sized boards together in order to give a 45-degree cut on the other side of each board. Once all the cuts were done, he did a quick dry fit.
Now I go ahead and groove the frame boards with the table saw, making it thick enough that I could put the paneling in that I will cut in the future.
Tim selected a few boards for the side and back paneling and ran them through the planer.
I go ahead and put a flat edge on each of the boards in order to resaw with the bandsaw.
After resawing, Tim had to plane the resawed side of each board.
I put some grooves in the center board that I was going to use to hold the veneer that I just created for the sides and the back paneling.
After making the grooves, Tim did some dry fitting and noticed that he had to make some adjustments to some of the boards.
So I took out my miter gauge and made those adjustments.
Whenever there is a repeated cut, we remember our friend telling us it's just best to make a jig for repeated cuts. So Tim goes ahead and makes a jig to create the tongue part of the tongue and groove joint that he'll be making.
I go ahead and use a dry fit and find if I need to make any adjustments to the width of the boards.
Tim made some adjustments to the top and bottom pieces as well.
And now I do another dry fit to make sure everything looks okay.
Once the dry fit was satisfactory, Tim went ahead and glued up the two side panels and the back panel of the armoire.
I had some beautiful knots in the bottom of this board, so I created a little epoxy pour at the bottom. I filled up any cracks with some wood putty.
Tim cleaned up the epoxied area to make sure that there is no blue tape stuck to the panel.
Next, I glued up the front frame.
Tim sanded down all the panels with a finishing sander using a 60 grit sandpaper.
I glue up the 4 sides together.
Tim uses every single clamp in his shop to hold this armoire together. Time to convert this saw stop to a $2,000 gluing table.
I started joining and gluing together all the bottom panels for the drawers.
Tim held these bottom panels together using some clamping jigs and clamps.
When the glue was set, I squared up all the panels. Then I cut the panels to the correct size.
Tim cuts about 2-inch strips out of some boards of cherry he had already prepared as sides for the drawers and squares them up. Tim must have counted all his boards and he seemed to have fell short on them, so he had to prepare some more 2-inch strips.
I went ahead and cut my miter joints into the sides of the 2-inch strips. I went ahead and made a groove into the side panels so that the bottom panel will fit in snugly.
After a quick dry fit, Tim cuts all the bottom panels to the exact size. Then he ran the boards through the thickness planer so they all have the same thickness.
Using blue painter's tape, I glued all the drawer faces together and repeated this process for 20 drawers.
Tim prepared some additional cherry boards for the top and bottom of the armoire.
I square up the top boards and cut them to the right size, and I glue up the top of the armoire. I cut all of the panels for the bottom in order to join it later.
While Tim's making the drawer pulls, we appreciate you sticking around through this complicated process. Hope you like our content. Please consider subscribing and ring that bell icon to get notified when we release new content.
After I completed the drawer pulls, I straightened and sanded down the top of the armoire and the armoire frame. There was a board on the frame that I was not comfortable with. I recut and reattached that piece of the frame.
Tim rounded off all the sides of the armoire using a roundover bit.
I sanded down all sides of the armoire.
Tim attached bottom panels of the armoire to the frame. Then he flipped over the entire armoire and started attaching the top. He had to make many adjustments as he went along.
Now I make the slides that the drawers slide in. The slides are about 2 inches tall, so I go ahead and cut a bunch of these 2-inch pieces in order for the drawer to rest.
Now it was time to assemble the armoire. He started off by inserting the drawer into the armoire frame. Then he inserted a spacer that was exactly 2 inches, exact height of the drawer. Then he inserted a slide. He repeated this process 20 more times for each side of the armoire.
As I'm doing this, I soon realized that some of the drawers need a little attention with the table saw. So I strategically take 1/16 inch off of each of the sides of the drawers. I set my table saw blade to 45 in order to give each drawer a little chamfer.
After chamfering all the drawers, they seemed to go in the frame very smoothly. So Tim decided to slide each and every drawer into the frame and see how it fits.
I take all the drawer pulls over to the sander and give them a good sanding.
While we are on the subject of sanding, the drawers had to be sanded down as well. So Tim took them out of the frame and gave them a good sanding.
I go ahead and use some CA glue and accelerator in order to attach all of the drawer pulls. So I found a beautiful jewelry box on a Facebook group. I wanted to incorporate the hinge lid onto this armoire.
So Tim took some measurements where the flip top should go and started cutting it using a combination circular saw and jigsaw.
I sanded down all of the areas where I had roughed it up with the saws. Then removed pieces of the frame off of this lid and sanded the lid down as well.
Now Tim selects a piece of scrap from this project to turn it into a trim. In order to find the correct height of the trim, Tim first inserts the very topmost drawer into the frame and cuts the piece to a correct size to fit into the frame.
After a quick dry fit, I measure and cut each piece to fit inside of the armoire. With a little CA glue and some grooves, this top box started coming together just like magic. I planed and cut the board that went into the grooves on this top box.
Tim inserted both of these panels into the grooves he had made earlier. They became the bottom panels for the top cubby. He inserted the front panel into the frame of the armoire and clamped it together.
I decided to go ahead and take a little bit off of the lid and sand it down. I made a jig using some scrap wood and a Forstner bit. I clamped the jig on the top of the cubby lid. This jig helps me line up the hole and drill straight onto the lid. This gave me even spaced holes in order to install my barrel hinges for the top.
My father always wanted a woodworking shop, but he wasn't able to. So when he saw ours, he just simply fell in love and he wanted to support us any way he can. He took some drawers into the other room to put tung oil finish on them.
I go ahead and finish installing the hinges on the lid side and the frame side.
Tim also installed a lid stay. It helps support the lid when you are trying to access the box. Tim also cut some solid cherry legs for this armoire. He also installed some rubber furniture feet so the cherry legs don't get damaged and they don't damage the floor either. With all this tung oil finish on it, it's a beauty to behold.
Using our new Monport laser, I had created some onlays of a cross that I had drawn in the past. Using Inkscape, I went ahead and clipped the image and overlaid it with a pattern I had found of some roses and a rose bush. Then I outlined all the images in red for the laser engraver to cut out at the last stage. And here it is, the final unveiling of the armoire.
I hope you like our content. Please consider subscribing. We also post on Rumble, TikTok, and BitChute. Don't forget to check us out. Our social media pages are linked in the description below.
We also have an Etsy store where we sell custom boxes, walking sticks, and more. If you're interested in having some custom work done for yourself or a friend, please contact us on our Facebook page, link in the description below.